further ado, I think we've heard enough from me for now. I am going to introduce Chris Mills, and there's kind of a leap of faith here that Chris is on the call, and when I hand over to him, he will miraculously spring into life. I can kind of hear something. So just to introduce Chris, if people don't know him, Chris has been a GP partner at Rawdon Surgery since 2006. He particularly enjoys building relationships and trust with people and families, which is not only the foundation of an excellent experience for people receiving care, but is also a foundation for creating safe and effective community services. Chris is also the chair of the Leeds GP Confederation's Strategy Board, the Clinical Strategy Group for Frailty, and the Ageing Well Programme Board. So I'm going to try and control the slides from here. So really, it's over to you, Chris. If you're there, come in, Chris.
Hello, Graham. Hi, everyone. Chris Mills, as Graham's introduced me. Great to be here. You're doing a great job, Graham. I know it's really tricky to handle all this tech, and so far flawless. So great. Just stay on that introduction slide a minute for me, the first one. So I guess I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the population health management programme in Leeds. And we're going to touch on where it's come from, the population that we're concentrating on, frailty, maybe some of the advantages. But I wanted to start by, I guess, reflecting back my experience of signing up to be a member, because for once I'm a delegate on the programme in Wave 3 and have committed to a 20-week programme. And that felt like a lot of hours to dedicate in 20 weeks in the middle of a pandemic. And in reality, in the last 4 months, I've, much like I'm sure everybody on this call, we've been through a whirlwind of change and just reacting every day and doing something different on a daily basis at work, just to cope, to create new services, put new things in. And it's felt like a real sort of encroachment on that, reacting to a crisis time to commit to this. And then I got to thinking about, well, actually what we have been doing is very kind of organisation based reactive approach to this, because that's all we can do. And I know we've achieved great things, all of us. I know the council and third sector services have really pulled the stops out to look after shielded people. The healthcare services turn themselves inside out to harness new technology and still deliver the care that we need to do whilst social distancing and protecting people. We've worked together to help care homes and so on and so forth. So we've done some fantastic work and put some real change in. Another reflection I've had is that we've also, I guess, experienced a sense of community or surge in community. I don't know about you, but I'm so impressed by 750,000 volunteers coming forward to help the NHS. I know from speaking to people I look after that there's spontaneous acts of people helping their neighbours out who are shielding, even walking down the street, on a daily basis in your neighbourhood, you're saying hello to strangers as you do the COVID shuffle and decide who's going to walk on the road and who's going to stay on the pavement. So, and I think when I think about that, I think actually this is probably the best time to be doing one of these programmes. And the reason is because we react, and because you're reacting as an organisation, I think if we continue to do that, we miss the opportunity of working together. And we also know that COVID falls unequally in society, and it's really important, I think, to plan to make sure that the people who are the most vulnerable in society get the help they need. And so that's ultimately why I committed to this 20-week programme. I think it aligns very much with population health management. Graham, if you go to the next slide. So to my mind, population health management at its heart is bringing together local organisations and dedicated people to create new relationships and create new sense of shared purpose. And then look at the data about the communities that you look after and start to pick a group of people who are potentially the most vulnerable and also stand to gain the most from additional support that we can do together, and then design these new services and interventions and use plan do quality improvement methodology, plan do study act type things to refine those services over time. So you know, in essence, we're in an incredible time for doing new things and harnessing this energy of change and community spirit, and then using the techniques of population health management to drive that forward. So population health management, I guess, where does it come from? Well, it comes from this document here. So this is the NHS long-term plan, published a couple of years ago. And whilst it's an NHS document and many people on the call are not part of the NHS, the minister who's in charge of the NHS is now also in charge of social care as well. And that combined budget and approach is, you know, is the biggest budget of any government department, billions and billions, and represents, you know, millions of workers across many sectors. And this document is still a key strategy in that approach. And in it talks about, its main thrust is about integrating community services and doing that at a neighbourhood level. Within this document, they call that primary care networks. In Leeds, we'd started down this road before this document was published, with neighbourhood teams and then on to local care partnerships. But where in Leeds we talk about local care partnerships, I think the vision for primary care networks is the same as LCPs. And it talks about that integration and driving that integration through using population health management techniques. And because of that, there was a national pilot in England, which Leeds became part of, and hence we all end up sitting here today. Next slide. So this is a slide just to remind us that we're here to talk about about people living with frailty, and the slide on the left-hand side is from 2016 through to March 2019 on the right-hand side. The green's mild frailty, orange moderate, and red severe. And the size of those bars, it represents the number of people in each part of that frailty cohort. So on the left, if you tot up all those categories, it's about 90,000 people. And then on the right-hand side, 3 years later, that's grown to 100,000 people. You'll see some people are entering from the healthy population. There's some crossover from mild to moderate, moderate to severe, and people leaving the cohort as well, largely through dying. I guess the other thing to note is, whilst we've pulled out that there's been an increase of 5% in the mild frailty, there's been a 15% increase in severe frailty over that time. And we know that we spend about half of the health and social care budget on this 100,000 people. And obviously that budget translates into a huge workforce in the city, and many hundreds of thousands of people hours per week to support those individuals. Next slide. So frailty doesn't fall evenly within our city. It's distributed unevenly, with some neighbourhoods having 3 times the rate of frailty of other neighbourhoods, and that rate also translates through into absolute numbers as well. So there's almost double absolute numbers in some neighbourhoods to other neighbourhoods. Next slide. And it's also skewed unevenly in the sex distribution, so more females living with frailty. Next slide. And deprivation has a massive impact as well. So the blue's moderate and the red's severe, and on the left is the most deprived neighbourhoods in the city, and on the right is the least deprived neighbourhoods in the city. And next slide. So that's just a sort of a high level look at the data sets around the populations. We'll dive a lot deeper in the programme into that, and you may have heard some of the warm-up sessions that Graham did at the LCP meetings and have seen some of that data already. About 2 years ago, we set up the Clinical Strategy Group for Frailty in the city, and much like LCPs, which are a multi-agency neighbourhood approach, this is a multi-agency group of people at the city level who came together to say, okay, what services have we got across the whole spectrum of health and care in the city? What are we missing? How should they interrelate to each other? And then we drew up a strategy document, and this is the sort of plan on the page for it, which is a bit complicated, but I'll try and talk you through it. So the top left with the 3 coloured ovals, that's about looking at the data to understand your population and then breaking the population down into more manageable sized groups of mild, moderate and severe. Obviously, the services that people living with mild frailty need are different to those with severe frailty, as people with mild frailty are generally getting on with their lives, and the aim there is to keep them as healthy and active and secure as possible and connected with friends and the mental health good in order to try and prevent that progression into moderate and severe frailty. We still need to bring our services together to look after the smaller numbers of people with moderate and severe frailty, and the best way of doing that is the middle box, which is integrating services and creating MDTs and multidisciplinary teams at a neighbourhood level, and then concentrating care on people who need it. That double-headed arrow on the right-hand side is a new service that we set up in the city, the virtual frailty ward, that's currently 2/3 of the way rolled out across the city and will be fully rolled out across the city by the autumn. And that's a consultant-led service, but mainly delivered by LCH and community staff to look after people when they become acutely unwell. So water infections, falls, various things, in trying to keep them at home instead of admitting them to hospital. As we know, if you can stay at home through illness, your recovery is faster. And then moving over onto the far right hand side, you know, inevitably people go into hospital, and the work within that box on the right hand side is all about speed and efficiency and least time in hospital and therapy and care afterwards. So the area that we're working in, or LCPs are tasked with, I guess, is that sort of looking at the cohorts of people in the community and that centre ground, and below the multidisciplinary team, there's the whole host of services that are present in communities to support people. So that's the area we occupy. Next slide. And then, you know, all 13 LCPs in the city are being asked to start on this journey to integrate and improve services. And, you know, we need a little bit of a framework to work to so that we end up with a commonality of approach. And so this is that framework, I suppose, as we come together and create new approaches. You know, it's really important that this is medical and social. And that we work with people's strengths, both as individuals, but as families and communities, and that we really try and personalise the care that we give. And obviously there's a big cast of people in every neighbourhood working to support people living with frailty, and we need to coordinate that and do active case management of vulnerable individuals. So, next slide, Graham. The new thing that's come along obviously is COVID, and that changes also the way we need to conceive our cohorts. And, you know, really important data here about how it falls unequally on people in our society, and the effects of mortality on Black, Asian and minority ethnic populations in the city. We also need to remember that mortality is the end stage. And there's much greater number of people who will be left permanently injured and disabled because of COVID as well. Next slide. We've rapidly, I guess, sort of worked together to put together some new services over the past 3 to 4 months for people who are shielding, and we're still currently in that process. And this is just to highlight that there is some crossover with shielding and frailty, but not a lot. So the left-hand slide is the a percentage of people shielding by age, and as we know, frailty starts to become more prevalent in sort of 70s and 80s. There are some people who are frail from 60s onwards, but not a lot. So there's a sort of a 50% crossover, I suppose, between the shielded and the frailty cohort. And then on the right hand side, we're looking at the effects of deprivation on the rates of people shielding and relating that to age. And as you can see, deprivation plays a factor in the number of people who need to shield in a community. Next slide, Graham. Okay, so we saw a fantastic video of the benefits of getting involved in the programme, and some of the speech bubbles that we get. I think universally every person who's involved enjoys the programme as individuals and sees that it starts to create the relationships that hopefully will put us in good stead. You heard from Feel Good Factor, the Feel Good Factor working with the Hatch LCP got wind of a £500,000 budget from West Yorkshire, along with 80 organisations put in an application for funding, and we're one of 13 that was successful. So, creating these local relationships not only improves care, but will lead on to other opportunities around funding and expanding your team. And then just a comment from the Crossgates, who've actually formed an LCP in the virtual world, which I suppose is the modern way. So the next slide, Graham. Really important, I guess, and I just wanted to stress the importance of the third sector in our city and how large and vibrant that is. And actually how important that is to the work we need to do at a neighbourhood level. Organisations that are expert in personalisation and strengths-based approach, coming together with health organisations, I think is really powerful and one of the key successes of this programme at a neighbourhood level. Next slide. So just an example of some of the impact on an individual. So I think this gentleman lives in Seacroft, working with the LCP there. They went through the data, picked a cohort of people to work with, found some resource for care coordination, and offered this gentleman care coordination. He ended up in hospital at one point, and then was discharged with a considerable package of care, which was 5 visits a day for 2 weeks. And then the care coordinator met up with him afterwards and had a conversation that led to them deciding that the best thing for him was not to have that full package of care. He didn't need it. Next slide. And that if you've got a relationship with somebody and understand their normal and talk to them about what they want, they often choose different things to what the health service thinks they need. And as you can see, that the impact on time for that team at an LCP level is considerable. And if you kind of top that up, you can do some crude maths, I suppose, on the opportunity costs, because that all happened on a number of occasions in the city on any one week. But equally, likewise, there'll be a whole host of people who are sat at home not getting the services, a lot of unmet need. And I guess the programme is about how we look to get that care and resource and hours in the right place. I think that's me done, Graham. Is there one more slide? Yeah, so I've just covered that. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening to me. And is it back over to you, Graham?